Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Renew. I'm Pastor Tony Cowan. Thanks for joining us, and let's get right to the point today. This week and next week we're talking about the subject of trusting God, trusting in the Lord. And we read from Proverbs chapter 3 verse 5 yesterday that we're to trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not to our own understanding. Why do we come to that place of being able to trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not to ourselves and our own understanding? Well, again, trust is a relationship issue. Trust is the belief or the confidence in somebody's reliance, their goodness, their honesty, their character. It is confidence in their character. So the more you know of somebody's character, that they're honest, they're good, they're out for your good, they're faithful, those character attributes, then the more you'll be able to trust that person. Well, it's the same thing is true with God. The more you know Him, the more you know that He is faithful, that He is merciful, that He is gracious, good, kind, that He is love. All those things, we will see that God is trustworthy, that we can trust in the Lord with all of our heart. In fact, you can come to the place where you trust the Lord probably no more than you trust yourself. You know, David was a good example of someone in the Old Testament who really trusted God. And you see why David trusted God the way he did. He trusted God because he knew God's character. He found out who God was. He found out that God was gracious. He was kind, full of compassion. His tender mercies were over all His works. All those things, all those attributes of the heart of God, those characteristics of God Himself that David knew, that caused him to be able to trust God. Now, where did he learn those things? He learned those things not out in the battlefield first. He learned those things out in the field tending the sheep. And he just carried that trust over into great battles. He was mightily used of God. Of course, we know the story of how he slew Goliath the giant. And how did he come to that place? When all the rest of Israel was hiding behind the rocks, they were afraid of Goliath. David said, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Well, how did he come to that place? Because he trusted God. See, while everybody else was comparing themselves and their abilities, trusting in themselves and their abilities to defeat Goliath, and they always came up short, of course. Goliath was a giant. We wouldn't call him shorty. He was somewhere in between 9 and 12 feet tall. So being that tall, that big, and that full of armor, that just scared everybody, because in their own ability and trusting in themselves, they had nothing to defeat Goliath with. But David came in from tending the sheep from his father's house, and he had found out in that field out there how he could trust God to defeat other things that were a lot bigger than him. In fact, he said, you know, Goliath is going to be like the lion and the bear. The lion and the bear attacked the sheep and carried one off, and he said he chased them down, grabbed them by the beard, and smote the lion and the bear. Well, the lion and the bear are a lot stronger, a lot bigger, a lot faster than David. But because David trusted God, he was put in a position of defeating those things. He carried that right over into the field of battle against Goliath. And of course, we know that he defeated Goliath out there. You know, the book of Daniel says this, Daniel chapter 11, verse 32. It says, "Those who know their God will be strong and do exploits." It's those who know their God. Why is that important? Because those who know their God are the ones who trust God. They're not going to trust in their own self, their own ability, man's ability to defeat whatever's coming against them, their challenge of life, their problem in life. They're going to be trusting in the Lord. You know, David didn't always do everything right. In fact, we see the good, the bad, and the ugly about David as well. He also messed up. But you know, rather than running away from God, he ran to God, because he trusted in God's goodness and His mercy, His faithfulness, His loving kindness to deliver him. Even when David came up against things in life that produced fear. See, David wasn't immune from the feelings of fear either. But he knew in times of fear, where he was going to be scared out of his wits, so to speak, that he could go and trust the Lord. We're going to read something out of Psalm 56. This is something that David wrote here. This gives us a real insight into David and his heart and how he looked at things. Psalm 56, verse 3 and 4, it says, "Whenever I am afraid." See, in other words, he wasn't immune from fear. There were things that came against him that made him afraid. He said, but whenever I'm afraid, he said, I will trust in you. I will trust in God. See, rather than running away from situations, rather than running away from God and seeing ourselves separated away from God, we ought to see ourselves united and hooked up with God. We've read this before in these podcasts, Romans chapter 8, verse 31, that says, if God be for us, who can be against us? Someone said it this way, if God is for us, it doesn't matter who's against us. David saw things from that perspective right there. He didn't see himself apart and separated away from God. He saw himself with God. God was on his side. God was for him. God was with him. And so he could trust God, and God would deliver him out of bad situations. Psalm 56 verse 4 goes on to say, in God I will praise his word. In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do to me. And then verse 11 says it this way, in God I have put my trust. I will not be afraid what man can do to me. See, that's the one thing right there that we can rely on, the fact that God is trustworthy, he's faithful. And we put our trust in him, his ability is going to show up in our behalf to put us over in life. He's going to strengthen us, he's going to help us because he's for us. Well, that's all the time I've got for today. If you like additional resources and materials, go to tonycowan.org. We'll see you tomorrow.